In this video, I'm going to talk about one of the places you can actually get your best education online from, and that is podcasts. Yeah, I love podcasts. If you know me very well, I'm a junkie on those. So the reason, part of it is, I think we've come from a point where we've been fed so much shortwave content. There is still actually a group of people who don't like shortwave content, where you can actually not get learning from like a 2-minute video. You can actually get, but it doesn't help you think. You can actually easily move to the next, and nothing is driven home with a 2-minute video. So I like long form content, and I know there's people out there who like long form content. So one of the ways you can get long form content, you have YouTube. These days I'm seeing Zooms. For the free version is 45 minutes, so I see 45-minute discussions on a topic with very many people on board. So that's another long mode of content. Then we have podcasts themselves. That's the one I'm going to talk about today. And then you can actually go for seminars as well. I've been to like 3-day seminars, very, very good, very impactful. And I think seminars is a good way for you to embed like culture in your organization and stuff like that. So why do I push for podcasts? We spend so much time like in traffic doing chores. You can actually listen to a podcast, get your learning while you're doing something else. I know multitasking there's many discussions on multitasking, but I think listening to something while doing something else is a good learning tool. If it needs for you to listen to it a second time, for you to get some of the concepts fully embedded within yourself, that's a different subject. But then I think you can listen to them while you're driving. I was spending on average like 1.5 hours, not even 1.5, I think 2 hours actually, 2 hours in traffic on a daily basis. So guess what's listening? What's in the car play? Usually it's radio. And the worst that I know is when you listen to radio is news. Every top of the hour you have news. There's all these topics people are talking about that actually won't benefit you. I say, in my little world, I say, guess what? Have a university on wheels. Let your car be a tool that you can actually learn from, because you spend so much time there. So 2 hours every day for 5 days a week, I'm saying, is a lot of time for you to actually get some learning. So our podcast is one. Then if you're doing your house chores, listen to something, learn something while you're doing your chores. Okay, when you're working out, listen to some motivation. There's podcasts on that as well, and that's a very good industry. But anyway, so this is a good list of podcasts. But then how do I get to this good list? There is a way I actually go to this as well. So number one, I say choose a niche. There's areas of interest actually you want to learn a couple of things from, so you have to choose a niche. There is very many podcast categories. I've seen comedies, I've seen entrepreneurship as a topic. If that's an area you like, you can actually look out for that. I've seen some that actually have discussions on culture. I like so many actually now have the interview style. Someone comes in on a certain topic and they just dig through it. I like those ones as well. But then I chose by getting my niche first. Then after getting my niche, I had to choose the platform. There is plenty of platforms where podcasts actually lie. We have Google Podcast, you have the Apple Podcast, then you have Spotify, you have Stitcher. There is so many. I saw actually recently, I think I saw Joe Rogan moved most of his content from YouTube to Spotify. It was like a couple of $1 million deals. So it's actually a whole industry that actually does have money in it. So long wave content is actually something people look for, and I'm one of those guys who like long wave content. So here is a list, not in any particular order, but I like these podcasts. So there's one called the Joe Rogan podcast. I already talked about that one from the Spotify, YouTube people, and I've seen so many of them do have the interview style, and then they have the YouTube recording, or less on YouTube, but then they do the audio on a platform like Spotify or Google Podcast. So you actually can have it if you want to watch them do the activity, or you just want to listen to them. Choice is yours. Then I have School of Greatness. Lewis House. Interview style as well. Gets a couple of guys on. They dig through so many subjects, but usually most of it is personal development and people's journeys and how they got the results they have. So he has good connections and has very, very good people that he interviews, and I like that his interview style doesn't really interrupt much. Then we have Impact Theory, which is Tom Bilyeu. I hope I say the name right. Almost same as School of Greatness, but then he also has a good interview style. Sometimes it's in direction of the listeners of the podcast, so that people get more value because they are on the Impact Theory podcast as well. Then we have I have the BRENDON Show. BRENDON Show is by Brendon Bouchard. He's an author of a couple of top-selling books, and he's a high performance coach for a couple of guys as well. So he's a performance coach, so his podcast is on performance, mindset, and stuff like that. Then I have, this is one of my favorites, Jordan B. Peterson. Jordan B. Peterson, the podcast usually has like extracts from talks he has done, and there's a couple of places he goes into, but most of it I say is, if you've seen 12 Rules of Life and some of his work, I think he has Maps of Meaning and 12 Rules of Life, so most of his podcast information is predicated on the content in those books, and since it's also given as content that's done as speeches, it's a good thing. The best thing I've seen about the Jordan B. Peterson podcast, there's been a series of biblical lectures. They're interesting ones. I say anyone who likes to see how stories can actually be formed, I think the biblical lecture series is a very good one on the Jordan B. Peterson podcast. Then I have London Real with Brian Rose. He's had these guys mainly have the same guys moving to their podcast and doing the interview. So London Real is interview style as well. Very, very good. I like that he also kind of keeps quiet and lets the person who's being called on to talk. He just has to steer the podcast in a certain direction so that everybody gets good value. And I'm seeing that there's been a couple of controversial topics he's gone into in this period, and some of the content has been banned on YouTube, and now they're looking for a platform to take all the content from some of the controversial content from London Real to a home that has not as fastened rules as YouTube. That's actually a good one. So London Real is a good one, very, very good. Then I've seen, there's one called On Purpose. On Purpose is by Jay Shetty. If you know Jay Shetty, he does a couple of shortwave viral videos usually come from Jay Shetty, and it's mainly on relationships and personal development space. So he also does long wave interviews with so many people as well. Very, very good podcast. Gary V podcast. I like it. It has I think if there's anyone who has online content for days, I think it's Gary V. So Gary V podcast has a lot to do with entrepreneurship, advisory for millennials, because I think that's the niche that he's basically trying to help those guys out who are trying to start business and they are young and stuck. It's a whole plethora of things on the Gary V podcast. Only problem with Gary V, when in the interview format, he kind of he interrupts people quickly when he's being interviewed or when he's interviewing people. So sometimes just be like, Gary V, just shut up and let the guy talk. But anyway, I love the Gary V podcast. That's his style. Ed Mylette is I think he has a thing called, I think it's Max Out, but it's Ed Mylette's podcast. So he also does interview style. He brings in people from different industries and has one-on-one. So he's also a coach as well, and he has I think he's a CEO to a company. It's financial. It's basically a company, financial services. So he has a company in financial services, but then he has a podcast as well, where people from different industries come on and talk to him, and you actually can get some value from those interviews. Then I've seen this is a good interviewer. There's one called The Passionate Few by Omar Elata, and Passionate Few There's the best interview I've actually seen on it. There was one that was done between MYLETTE and Grant Cardone. It was like a trio, 3 guys, one podcast episode. The questions were really nice. I like his style. That was one of the ones where I was like, this guy is good at interviews. So Passion Few, very, very good one. Then I have Valuetainment. 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 Okay, so is by Patrick Bet-David. Patrick Bet-David has a company, also has a company, runs in the insurance industry. Then he has a podcast where he talks about entrepreneurship as well. And then he has fascination from some topics that he gets interviews of some guys. Like he likes, I think, things about gangs and crime. So there's a couple of interviews he does with former mafias. Very interesting stuff. So if you like the Godfather series and stuff like that, there's people out there who are exactly those characters that he gets on. So I like Valuetainment. Very educative, and he's good at interviews. There was one of the good ones I've seen before that is memorable for me. There was one done with the late Kobe Bryant. Very, very good one, just to see the mindset of a high performance athlete. There's so many other good ones. I've seen a couple of good ones with Kiyosaki, and then sometimes they delve into topics currently happening. I saw one on finance. They do a couple of you understanding finance and stuff to do with money, so getting your money right. I think Valuetainment is a good one. And then I have one of the grandfathers of podcasts. There's one called the Tim Ferriss Show. Doesn't mean it's the worst, but I'm saying I didn't give them in any order, but this is a good list of podcasts. So Tim Ferriss Show usually gets into he does interview style for some of them, and then I like that he gets into giving you solutions to, let's say, how can you read faster. There's those skills everybody usually needs, and I like that he gets into a couple of those, teaching you some shortcuts to certain things. And that's the Tim Ferriss Show. So that is my list. I think I'll leave some in the description below for those of you who want to check out the content of them. But otherwise, I like content that has to do with personal development, and then interview style with particular people that I like. Oh, I forgot. Joe Rogan had an interview with Kevin Hart. There was a fascinating interview. So anyway, I'm just rambling, but anyway, it is what it is. So if you want the podcasts, I'll leave some in the detail in the narration below on the video. And then I'm not sponsored by any of these platforms. Otherwise, you can know where to get. You can go to Spotify, Google Podcast, Apple Podcast, Stitcher. There's so many others. You can do your research from there. But otherwise, thanks for listening. And if you like the content, subscribe to the channel. I hope you got some value from this, and adios. Oh, before I go, if you like to recommend your friends to any podcast, just put in the comments below. I hope you'll find it there. Adios once again.